The Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund announces holding over 400 million in Bitcoin ETFs. Absolute madness. This is one of the craziest news of 2025. We see the third largest sovereign wealth fund in the world now publicly and officially holding Bitcoin. There have been speculations about this for a long time. Sisi announced this a long time ago. Now we see the official confirmation here, and this is going to make waves. Welcome to the nation-state Bitcoin adoption. It's officially starting now. So far, it has mainly been smaller countries that have adopted Bitcoin. Or it has been, for example, sovereign wealth funds like the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which indirectly holds Bitcoin through MicroStrategy through other investment vehicles. But now, for the first time, we have a direct Bitcoin investment here through the Bitcoin ETFs. And now we're looking at why this can be the big kickstart. I've always told you, hey, at some point the nation-states will come. At first, individuals come, then companies, and eventually the nation-states will also come. And this is now also putting pressure on Donald Trump. Yesterday, I made that intense video, which received a lot of feedback, where I said, hey, there are now people saying that Donald Trump is backing down and that he's not going through with it as intensely as he might have originally planned or as the Bitcoin community might have expected. But hey, this puts even more pressure on Donald Trump, because if the United Arab Emirates buy Bitcoin, then other nations must also, well, they don't have to, but they definitely should. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And I already said yesterday, even if the official Bitcoin strategy reserve doesn't come to the US, at least not on a large scale, like on the Donald Trump level, the states will probably adopt it sooner. But if the Bitcoin reserve strategy doesn't come at the national level, then there's a possibility that it could happen through the Sovereign Wealth Fund or the U.S. And this can now also increase the probability again. We will also see shortly how the probability has shot up that more countries will buy Bitcoin this year. And ultimately, this brings the whole game to a completely new level. We also see a lot of comments here. For example, here, welcome to the nation-state Bitcoin race. Or here, British Hodl, who says, welcome to the nation-state Hunger Games. So with the Hunger Games, he means that it really comes down to the last nation that jumps on Bitcoin will starve, or they will have a very, very big problem. That means people who adapt to Bitcoin very early, not only on the state level, but also on the individual level, benefit massively, as we have seen time and again. That means it's always worth it to be involved early in a new investment that establishes itself. I'll say it again. Bitcoin is an investment that everyone needs, no one understands, but no one can stop. And that makes Bitcoin the ultimate investment. And that's why states also understand, hey, I need to jump on this. I don't have to immediately park my entire reserve in Bitcoin. But at least 1 to 5% is absolutely necessary here, and I definitely need to be in the game. Senator Cynthia Lummis says here, I told you the race was on. It's time for America to win. So here Cynthia Lummis is not referring to the Strategic Reserve, but to the Sovereign Wealth Fund here in Abu Dhabi. She says the same thing, the race is now in full swing. And if we, as the USA, still want to be in a good position, then we definitely need to act now. And that's also the big message too. For example, Germany and other nations that have sold their Bitcoin. It simply shows that Bitcoin has now reached a completely different level. We're no longer in the Mickey Mouse stage, but we've now arrived in the Champions League with the big players. Now the large pension funds, nation-states, and the most powerful people in the world, the largest asset managers in the world, are all starting to massively accumulate Bitcoin. And even more importantly, these are just the official reports. We don't know if even more Bitcoin might be being bought under the hood. We don't know if perhaps Abu Dhabi or the United Arab Emirates might have Bitcoin somewhere under the hood. And that's why the USA absolutely needs to buy Bitcoin here. And then there were other people like Prince Philip and many others who said that nation-states are secretly accumulating Bitcoin. And we only ever know the official stories. That means this is now the official announcement. This is also an announcement that is not brand new here, but from Q4 of 2024. It may also be that by now, they have accumulated even more Bitcoin because disclosure stories are always delayed by a few months. And we have to be very, very careful because the incentives for nations to secretly buy Bitcoin are getting higher and higher. And there are also speculations, for example, that Russia has much larger Bitcoin holdings, but has bought them secretly. That China has much larger Bitcoin holdings, but has also bought them secretly. And this is very, very relevant, what's happening here. And the people who don't pay attention here, the people who sleep through all of this, they will simply lose massively here. And therefore, here's another call to action. This is not a purchase recommendation or anything like that, but you need to assess for yourself now, okay, do I want to be part of the party here or do I not want to be part of it? And I'm putting a link below for you now, 21 Bitcoin, how you can buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. Here, with the code, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. And if you do want to be part of the space race here, then you should definitely consider increasing your position now. And if you don't want to be part of it, then you simply say, okay, I'd rather bet on old school stories, I'd rather bet on the horse, I'd rather somehow bet on landline phones when there are already space rockets, automobiles, and smartphones. Then you can also say, okay, I'll continue to bet on the euro, or I'll continue to bet on a savings account or something like that. Olaf Scholz will probably do that. But now we have the big players who say, no, I'm not interested in a savings account anymore. I'd rather put my money into Bitcoin. The only thing that still raises suspicion here, the market has reacted very well to it. The internet is going crazy, the price has reacted positively. But David Bailey also says, how can this news not make the price pump even more? So this is absolutely the most incredible news. But it really seems that the market has become hardened by now. Such incredible news would have moved the entire market massively 2 years ago. Nowadays, we see that the market doesn't react as strongly to such news. Yes, we can see quite well we are around 100,000 US dollars. That is very, very good. But many people just say, okay, Bitcoin should already be at 150, at 200,000 US dollars or much higher. Because with such incredible news that we have, it can't be that Bitcoin is only around 100,000 US dollars just lingering here. But now we really have to be careful. We've seen something like a lull phase over the last 2 or 3 weeks. The Bitcoin price has somehow stagnated. It didn't really move forward, but it also didn't really drastically downward. People have become impatient. And such news can also be exactly the spark here that leads to Bitcoin gaining momentum again. And that the market sentiment shifts again. And that the momentum is back on Bitcoin's side and Bitcoin surges massively upward again. According to the blog trainer, the publication of these purchases is rightly considered a significant milestone by the Bitcoin and crypto community. The well-known analyst Macroscope commented on the news by saying, certainly the most significant disclosure of Bitcoin ownership in history. This has enormous global implications, so just take that in. He says here, not only is this the most incredible story of 2025 that we've seen so far, but the most incredible disclosure of Bitcoin purchases in history. Because we haven't seen anything like this in a similar form before. Okay, we know El Salvador, which somehow buys a Bitcoin every day here. Or we know countries like Bhutan, which occasionally buy Bitcoin here. But these are also amounts with the 400 million, which are not even that relevant. So 400 million is quite okay, but it's not like it's completely spectacular. But the spectacular thing here is the external impact. What kind of external impact is it when the third largest state in the world here buys Bitcoin? That's different from when some country that no one mentions buys Bitcoin. And even El Salvador, I'm actually here in El Salvador myself. I think it's awesome what's happening here. Look here at the beach, but El Salvador is not one of the big players. El Salvador is a small country with a relatively small gross domestic product. And El Salvador doesn't have a super wealth fund that can be compared to Abu Dhabi. And this is now the really, really big step that the third largest wealth fund, I keep saying it, the third largest wealth fund in the world, is accumulating Bitcoin. It should be noted, which is a bit unfortunate, that they are not holding Bitcoin directly, but rather through Bitcoin ETFs. But I somewhat understand it. It's simply easier for the treasury, it's easier to store. I have also said this repeatedly. If, for example, the USA were to buy Bitcoin, if they were to create a stockpile, it would make a lot of sense to do it through a direct purchase. But often we see with such sovereign and wealth funds that they tend to buy stocks, meaning they purchase securities. And therefore, it could also be that, for example, the sovereign and wealth fund here in the USA holds the Bitcoin ETFs. But if they create a stockpile, like for example here in El Salvador, they might prefer to rely on self-custody. I'll put a link below to a hardware wallet, where you can easily and securely keep your Bitcoin in self-custody. Because what happens here is that, unfortunately, Bitcoin is only bought via ETF here. In this case, you don't have complete sovereignty. Then the United Arab Emirates must always rely on the USA, that with BlackRock or with Coinbase, everything goes well with self-custody or with the custody of the Bitcoin ETFs. Because it's simply the case that you buy the IBIT BlackRock ETF or something like that, and the Bitcoins are all stored at Coinbase. And here you also have a potential concentration risk. And you could avoid that if you held Bitcoin in self-custody, but for large players, it's relevant that it's not so easy to hold Bitcoin of that size. You need to have the infrastructure, you need to have the knowledge, and simply pressing the buy button here and buying 400 million in some ETFs. That's just very, very easy. We also see this here in the statistics. This is from the block trainer. We see the sovereign wealth funds here because we see at the very top is here, Norway. They have 1,700 billion here. Then we have China here. They have 1,300 billion in their sovereign fund. And then we have Abu Dhabi here, which actually has 1,000 billion in their sovereign fund. And then you can also see the proportions here. So if the Abu Dhabi sovereign fund has 1,057 billion, so 0.4 billion is basically Bitcoin allocation here. That means we have less than 1,000 here. You always start small, with something like 1%. 0.5%, even 0.1% is already significant. Oh, I also wanted to show you the other countries. Then there's the China Sovereign Fund with 1,000 billion and the Kuwait Sovereign Fund with 57 billion. There were also rumors, I think it was about a year ago or so, Max Kaiser spread it, I believe, that the Sovereign Fund of Kuwait was supposed to invest a relatively large sum in Bitcoin. But we haven't seen that publicly yet. But we do see that there are always rumors in the background that sometimes get confirmed. That means we often have rumors that are not confirmed. But now we definitely have a rumor here that is being confirmed. What's crazy is that the chance has suddenly shot up that new countries will buy Bitcoin this year. The chance is currently at 87%. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the USA will buy Bitcoin. Could also be another country. It could also be that Germany buys Bitcoin or something. Well, Germany will not buy Bitcoin. They're just too dumb, especially when you see what's going on there. Or who knows, if the government changes, maybe they can change something relatively quickly. I don't know. But the probability is now at 87% that another country will buy Bitcoin this year. I can definitely emphasize that it's becoming more likely now. And also the probability that there will be a strategic Bitcoin reserve in the USA or Bitcoin at the level of a sovereign wealth fund is definitely increasing now. I don't have any official statistics, but I'm just claiming that. And at the same time, we see such news. Here, like State Street and Citibank, which are now launching their Bitcoin and crypto offerings. And here David Bailey says again, if you're not buying Bitcoin right now, you're an idiot. So if you're not buying Bitcoin now, then you're really being dumb. So no investment advice, this is just from David Bailey. Because now we have State Street and Citibank issuing Bitcoin and crypto offerings. And that's also what a lot of people have been saying. Hey, as soon as the banks are on board. Yes, I know, as a Bitcoiner, one is always critical of banks. But these are simply massive leverage effects that we are seeing here. When a bank introduces Bitcoin, we suddenly have the potential for a few hundred million people who might then buy Bitcoin, depending on how big the bank is. It doesn't have to be 100 million. That might be a bit of an exaggeration. But at least a few million, depending on how big the bank is. And that also sends a signal. Then it's very likely that credit offerings will also be further rolled out this year so that you can also use Bitcoin as collateral. And we need to keep observing more and more how this is escalating, because it's massive what's coming our way. Folks, the future is orange. This is another sign that it was worth it to hold on through the tough times, not to give up, and to keep going. Let me know what you think about it. I'm signing off here. I'll show the whole edge here in El Salvador again. And we'll see each other, folks. Until then, peace out.